Have you ever wondered what happens when the stories we think we know about someone suddenly unravel? When a carefully curated image, the one presented to the world, is pulled back, layer by layer, revealing details that shock, confuse, and sometimes frighten. That's exactly where we find ourselves today. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, a woman whose life has been scrutinized for decades, is at the center of a storm that most people never saw coming. And it isn't just about her. It's about her family, her past, and the shadows that seem to follow even the most polished public image. Just a few weeks ago, a single revelation made the rounds online, causing ripples across social media, gossip outlets, and royal commentary circles alike. Tom Bower, a name synonymous with explosive biographies and unflinching investigations, dropped a bombshell in his latest work. According to sources connected to the story, Bower referenced a piece of the past that had been hidden, or perhaps carefully ignored, for decades. A mugshot, an arrest record, and allegations linked to Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland, in a time far removed from the luxury and media frenzy of the present day. Suddenly, questions that no one dared ask publicly began circulating with alarming intensity. What really happened in Doria Ragland's past, and why has it never been talked about? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Now let's pause here. Take a moment and think about that question. Why does a story from decades ago matter now? After all, isn't everyone entitled to a life that isn't defined by their past mistakes, alleged or real? That's a fair point. But here's the thing. When you are part of the royal narrative, every detail is magnified. Every rumor, every record, every fragment of information can take on a significance far greater than it might in any ordinary life. And when someone like Tom Bower, with a history of uncovering hidden truths, publishes his findings, the ripple effects are enormous. So how did we even get here? How did a private figure like Doria Ragland, who had largely stayed out of the public spotlight for years, suddenly become the subject of intense speculation? To understand, we need to consider the context. Doria has always been known, publicly at least, as a devoted mother, a calming presence in Meghan's life, someone whose guidance helped her daughter navigate the tumultuous world of Hollywood and then, later, the even more treacherous waters of royal life. She was the quiet stabilizer, the person who stood behind Meghan as the world looked on, often judgmental and unforgiving. But the story that Bower hints at, and that his sources claim to have verified, is entirely different. It's not about motherhood or guidance or poise under pressure. It's about a period in Doria's life when she was allegedly involved with the law in a way that many find shocking. The details, while unverified publicly, suggest a history that doesn't align with the image most of the world has been shown. And here's where the tension kicks in. The revelation isn't just a footnote. It has implications for how Meghan is perceived, for how the royal family responds, and for the media narrative that has long been carefully managed. Imagine the scenario. A document surfaces, maybe a court record, maybe a mugshot. Social media catches wind of it. Headlines start to form, speculation spreads like wildfire, and suddenly, every public action by Meghan and her team is under microscopic review. Every appearance, every statement, every social media post becomes a potential reaction to a past event that was never meant to be public knowledge. The stakes are enormous, and for someone who has carefully curated her public persona, the sudden reemergence of a family-related story is a nightmare scenario. Let's break it down further. Why would a past arrest, or allegations thereof, be so incendiary? In the world of celebrity and royalty, perception is everything. Public image is currency, and even minor cracks in that image can lead to seismic shifts in public opinion. But here's the twist. The story isn't just about the arrest, the record, or the mugshot. It's about secrecy, suppression, and the questions that arise when information appears after years of silence. Why was this never reported? Why did no major outlet pick it up? Was it buried intentionally, or simply lost in the shuffle of decades? And most importantly, what does it reveal about the people involved, both Doria and Meghan? At this point, you may be asking yourself, is any of this verified? And the honest answer is complicated. Tom Bower is a respected journalist and biographer, known for digging where others fear to tread. His claims are often based on interviews, documents, and sources that may not always be accessible to the general public. That means the story carries weight, but it also means there's room for doubt, dispute, and debate. And that uncertainty? It's exactly what makes this story so captivating. The human brain craves closure, yet what we have here is a puzzle, pieces scattered across time and circumstance. And it doesn't stop there. The personal stakes for Meghan Markle are enormous. Every revelation about her family has the potential to reflect on her, no matter how unfairly. In a world obsessed with status, propriety, and image, an alleged family scandal, even one from decades ago, can be weaponized. It can be used to question credibility, judgment, and character. And with the intense scrutiny Meghan has faced throughout her life, from Hollywood to the royal spotlight, this is a story with combustible potential. But let's not overlook another dimension, the human element. Doria Ragland, whatever her past may have been, is still a person. She is still Meghan's mother. And in stories like these, it's easy to get lost in the drama and lose sight of the people whose lives are being dissected. There's pain, confusion, and frustration behind the headlines, all of which fuel the intensity of public reaction. Every leaked document, every alleged mugshot, every whispered claim has real consequences for the individuals involved. Now, here's where the intrigue deepens. According to sources familiar with the matter, there are inconsistencies in the records, contradictory reports in local archives, and missing documentation that has led many to question the full story. Some suggest that what surfaced online may be a mixture of fact and rumor, yet the appearance of these materials is enough to provoke outrage, curiosity, and intense debate. Social media users have already begun forming narratives, sharing screenshots, and drawing conclusions based on partial information. And as we know, once a story spreads online, the version that sticks isn't always the fully accurate one. It's the one that's most compelling, scandalous, or shareable. So what does this mean for you, the audience, watching right now? Why should you care about decades-old records or alleged mugshots? The answer lies in the larger story. The narrative about power, secrecy, and the construction of image in the modern era. This isn't just about Meghan Markle or Doria Ragland. It's about how we, as a society, respond to revelations, how we judge people based on fragments of information, and how a single document or photo can ignite worldwide discussion. It's a story about human nature, curiosity, and the tension between private truth and public perception. And as we move through this video, that tension will only increase. Every chapter will dig deeper, revealing layers of context, alleged evidence, and public reaction. We will explore how Tom Bower's reporting fits into the broader picture, why the media has often remained silent, and how the individuals involved have navigated, or avoided, these turbulent waters. You'll see timelines that contradict themselves, statements that seem to shift, and pieces of the puzzle that may never fully align. By the end of this journey, you won't just know the story as presented by headlines or snippets online. You'll understand the complexity, the human drama, and the stakes involved. And you'll be left asking yourself questions that linger long after the video ends. Questions like, what do we really know? Who controls the narrative? And when the past resurfaces, how much can, or should, it define the present? And here's the kicker, the mini cliffhanger that will carry us into the next chapter. When the first alleged documents emerged, the response from Meghan's team was swift and calculated, but not entirely clear. Silence, legal threats, and selective clarification only fueled speculation. And the image at the center of the storm, the mugshot, has sparked debates online that continue to this day. Some say it confirms everything Bower hinted at. Others insist it's taken out of context, misinterpreted, or even manipulated. Have you ever wondered why, when Tom Bower publishes a book, the world listens? Not because he whispers, not because he hints, he doesn't. Bower writes in bold strokes, with evidence, interviews, and a relentless commitment to documenting the stories no one else dares touch. And that's exactly why his latest revelations about Meghan Markle's family set off alarms in multiple circles, royal, media, and public alike. To understand why this story matters so intensely, you first need to understand the man behind it. Tom Bower is not your typical biographer. He doesn't operate on rumor alone. He doesn't sugarcoat. His name has become synonymous with investigative rigor, digging into the lives of powerful figures with a combination of legal smarts and relentless persistence. Over decades, he has exposed politicians, celebrities, and billionaires alike, often creating waves that reverberate long after the first print run. In fact, many of his subjects have reacted with panic, denial, or legal maneuvers before the public even had access to the details. His books have toppled reputations and forced institutions to respond, sometimes with damage control, sometimes with silence, but always with attention. So why is this important for Meghan Markle's story? Because Bauer's method is simple but terrifying. Uncover the details, corroborate with multiple sources, and let the story speak for itself. When he mentions a fact, rumor, or document, it is never casually thrown into the mix. It is backed by research, interviews, and a meticulous record trail. And in this case, the claim linked to Doria Ragland is exactly the type of revelation that Bauer specializes in. A story hidden in plain sight, ignored by the mainstream, yet capable of igniting a global conversation. Let's take a step back and look at the history of his reporting. Bauer has built a reputation over decades for fearlessness. His investigations into high-profile figures have included politicians with decades of public trust, CEOs with billions on the line, and celebrities whose images were carefully cultivated over years. Each investigation follows a similar pattern. First, quiet research. Second, a network of insiders and sources. Third, cross-verification of documents. And finally, the publication that often leaves the subject scrambling. When Bauer points a finger, it isn't idle speculation. He is known to dig into legal archives, court records, and first-hand interviews, connecting dots that others either overlook or deliberately ignore. And that is why, even before this latest claim about Meghan Markle's mother became public, whispers of anticipation had already begun circulating in both the royal press and online forums. Everyone who knows the weight of his reporting understood that when Tom Bauer writes, he doesn't do it lightly. There is a trail of meticulous research behind every sentence. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that explains the attention, but what does it have to do with Meghan or her mother specifically? The answer is that Bauer's reporting style inherently magnifies anything he touches. By focusing on documents, records, and testimonies that are rarely publicly available, he draws the audience into a world of hidden truths. And in this case, the story begins with decades-old records, a mugshot, and sources who claim knowledge of events most people have never heard of. To the average observer, this could seem like just another scandal. But when Bauer frames it, it becomes more than scandal. It becomes a narrative about secrecy, privilege, and consequences. And it isn't just the content, it's the timing. Bauer doesn't release information arbitrarily. His books and reports often appear when attention is at its peak, or when a revelation will have the maximum impact. In this case, the timing coincides with Meghan's ongoing media presence, her brand management, and the ever-watchful gaze of social media. That means the story isn't just being read. It's being dissected, debated, and shared at lightning speed. One interview, one social media post, or one headline can ignite weeks of discussion. And that's exactly what happened. Consider the psychology of it. When a figure like Bauer highlights a past event, especially one that the public wasn't aware of, it triggers a cascade of curiosity. People want to know, is it true? How did it happen? Why hasn't anyone reported it before? And, perhaps most importantly, what does it mean for the people involved today? That combination of curiosity, suspicion, and the search for hidden truth is the engine that drives engagement. It's why millions of people read, share, and comment on his work. But let's not oversimplify. Bauer's reputation also carries risk. His investigations are not universally welcomed. Subjects often respond with legal threats, silence, or attempts to discredit sources. In some cases, his revelations have led to lawsuits or public rebukes. And yet, despite this pushback, the information has a way of surviving, circulating, and eventually being discussed in the open. That persistence, this combination of fearlessness and meticulousness, is why his involvement in the Meghan Markle story is so significant. Now, let's look at the mechanics of Bauer's reporting style and why it creates such high stakes for someone like Meghan Markle. First, he builds a timeline. Every claim is anchored in dates, events, and known interactions. Second, he seeks corroboration. Multiple sources, sometimes anonymous, are used to verify key elements. Third, he contextualizes the information, connecting dots that are often invisible to the casual observer. And fourth, he releases it in a way that allows the audience to form their own conclusions while still delivering undeniable pressure on the subject. For Meghan and her mother, this method is particularly dangerous. The story touches not only on personal reputation, but also on the perception of familial legacy and character. And because Bauer's style often reveals nuances that mainstream media shy away from, every claim, even one presented with caveats, has the potential to dominate public discourse. Social media explodes, discussion forums light up, and suddenly the narrative is no longer controlled by official spokespeople. It is controlled by the curiosity and speculation of the audience. Here's another layer to consider. Bauer's reporting doesn't simply present allegations. It also highlights contradictions, omissions, and responses, or lack thereof, from the subjects themselves. In other words, silence becomes part of the story. In the case of Meghan Markle, her team's reaction, or lack of detailed clarification, added fuel to the fire. By not addressing certain aspects directly, by choosing selective statements and controlled messaging, the narrative grows in unexpected directions. And when Bauer's investigative work intersects with that silence, the result is a perfect storm, a story that is irresistible to the public, impossible to ignore, and charged with suspense. This chapter of the story isn't just about Tom Bauer's method. It's about the psychological effect it has on those implicated. Think about it. When a journalist with a reputation for digging deep focuses on your family, every old decision, every minor incident, every potential misstep suddenly gains new relevance. The fear isn't just about exposure. It's about how it will ripple through media, public perception, and legacy. And that ripple effect, once it begins, is nearly impossible to contain. To put it bluntly, when Bauer publishes, the world doesn't get to look away. Headlines spin, social media churns, commentators debate, and audiences worldwide are left questioning everything they thought they knew. For Meghan Markle, someone whose life has been subject to near-constant scrutiny, the implications are staggering. Not only is her personal reputation at stake, but also the carefully curated narrative surrounding her family, her upbringing, and her image as a royal figure. Every new claim invites analysis, speculation, and, of course, emotional responses from audiences who feel invested in her story. And that's the unique power of Tom Bauer. He doesn't just publish books. He sets off chains of inquiry, sparks debates, and forces conversations that may have been avoided for decades. The mere appearance of his latest investigation into Doria Ragland's past, records, allegations, and alleged mugshots, creates a whirlwind that draws in the media, the public, and even those inside royal circles. It's not just a story. It's a phenomenon, a magnifying glass that makes every detail larger than life. By now, you may be asking yourself, how far back does this go? What exactly is being referenced? And more importantly, how does this tie into Meghan herself? That's the tension that will carry us into the next chapter. Bauer's reputation is not simply a backdrop. It is the engine driving this narrative. His method ensures that when the first pieces of alleged evidence appear, they don't just sit quietly. They demand attention, scrutiny, and reaction. And here's the cliffhanger that transitions perfectly into the next chapter. When Bauer first hinted at records from the 1990s, the immediate question wasn't just about accuracy, it was about timing. Why now? Why emerge after decades of silence? And perhaps most importantly, who benefits if the story gains traction? The answers are not simple, and they are not fully known. But one thing is certain. When Tom Bauer's name is attached, the world listens, and the story refuses to fade quietly into the background. Imagine a story that's been hidden for decades suddenly re-emerging, an alleged record, a legal document, or even a mugshot that no one expected anyone to see again. That's exactly what happened with the claims surrounding Doria Ragland, Meghan Markle's mother. According to sources referenced in Tom Bauer's latest work, there exists, or existed, a set of records that suggest a past far removed from the calm, composed image many associate with her today. The twist? These records are disputed, incomplete, and, in some cases, impossible to verify publicly. And yet, their very appearance online or in commentary sparked global conversation. Let's start with the basics. What are these alleged records? According to supporters of Bauer's claims, they include a combination of arrest logs, court documents, and law enforcement notes from the 1990s. Specifically, some sources mention an incident involving drug possession and resisting arrest. These aren't simply footnotes in a public ledger. They're documents that, if verified, could reveal a side of Doria Ragland that contradicts the public narrative of her life as a steadying, supportive figure in Meghan's upbringing. Now, here's the thing. Supporters insist these records exist for multiple reasons. First, there are archived law enforcement documents in local county repositories. Some claim they saw microfiche or scanned copies years ago. Second, there are anecdotal reports from contemporaries, neighbors, acquaintances, and even professionals in law enforcement who allegedly corroborated the story in private interviews. Third, there are indirect mentions in court dockets and legal summaries that may allude to the incident without naming names explicitly. Taken together, supporters argue the pattern is convincing. A past incident occurred, it was documented, and it remained hidden until now. But, as with any high-profile story, the devil is in the details. Critics argue that these records are incomplete at best and possibly misinterpreted at worst. Many note that local archives from the 1990s are notoriously unreliable, with missing pages, mislabeled files, and gaps in indexing that make verification extremely difficult. Others highlight inconsistencies in the timeline. Certain dates in the alleged records do not align with known facts about Doria's life, including her professional activities and geographic location during the same period. In short, skeptics caution against taking the records at face value without independent verification. What makes this story even more combustible is the timing of the alleged emergence of these documents. Decades had passed without public mention. Then suddenly, with the publication of Bauer's book, these documents, or references to them, resurface, instantly capturing attention. That raises an obvious question. Why now? Supporters claim it's simply a matter of diligent research uncovering what had been hidden in archives for years. Critics, however, suggest selective presentation, that the records may be exaggerated, misrepresented, or taken out of context to create maximum shock value. Let's examine one of the central pieces of controversy, the alleged mugshot. According to reports, the image surfaced briefly online and in discussions connected to Bauer's investigation. It supposedly depicts a younger Doria Ragland in police custody, wearing a standard-issue jumpsuit, with a placard indicating charges. To supporters, this image is undeniable proof of a documented past incident. To skeptics, it raises numerous questions. Why hasn't it appeared in official public records before? Could it have been mislabeled, misattributed, or altered digitally? And perhaps most crucially, even if authentic, does a single mugshot capture the full context of the situation, or does it merely provide a fragmentary snapshot of a complex event? The next layer involves court documents. Supporters claim there are dockets or notations indicating charges were filed, hearings took place, and a resolution was reached, possibly through plea agreements or dismissed cases. They point to specific case numbers, approximate dates, and locations that allegedly matched known details of Doria's life at the time. Critics push back, noting that these details are circumstantial and that names, dates, and locations in local archives can be misindexed. They also caution that documents taken out of context, especially legal documents, can appear far more incriminating than they truly are. Adding to the intrigue, there are reports that multiple media outlets were made aware of these records but chose not to publish. That alone has fueled speculation about why this story has remained hidden for decades. Supporters see this as confirmation that powerful figures or institutions may have suppressed the story. Critics argue it simply reflects responsible journalism. When evidence is inconclusive or unverifiable, outlets often opt to avoid publication rather than risk legal consequences or reputational damage. Either way, the absence of coverage amplifies curiosity and adds an air of conspiracy, intentional or not. Another aspect that draws attention is the conflicting timeline. According to supporters, Doria's alleged incident took place during a period when she was reportedly in Los Angeles. But critics note that some accounts place her in different locations at the same time. Social media sleuths have pored over addresses, dates of employment, and public appearances to reconcile these discrepancies, but the results are inconclusive. Supporters argue that minor discrepancies are common in decades-old records, while critics see them as potential evidence that the story has been embellished or misremembered. Let's also consider the human element. Alleged records, even if authentic, can only tell part of the story. They can indicate an event occurred, but not the circumstances, motivations, or broader context. Was this an isolated incident? Was it influenced by extenuating factors? Was it mischaracterized in the documents themselves? These questions create a tension that both fuels discussion and complicates judgment. People are naturally drawn to sensational details, yet the true story may be far more nuanced, personal, and complex. And then there's the media landscape itself. In the age of social media, partial documents or alleged images can go viral even before verification occurs. Screenshots circulate, discussion threads explode, and millions form opinions based on incomplete evidence. That dynamic means that even disputed or unverifiable records can have a tangible impact on public perception. For Meghan Markle and her family, that's a high-stakes gamble. The court of public opinion can render judgments far faster than any legal system. This chapter wouldn't be complete without noting the reactions from both camps. Supporters of Bauer's reporting insist that even the mere suggestion of suppressed records matters. It demonstrates the lengths to which certain narratives have been controlled and curated over time. Critics, meanwhile, caution viewers against drawing conclusions, emphasizing that allegations are not facts and that context is everything. The tension between these perspectives is what keeps the story alive, driving clicks, comments, and heated debate. Finally, consider the psychological effect. When records, or alleged records, emerge, they create cognitive dissonance for the audience. People struggle to reconcile the composed, public-facing image of Doria Ragland with the idea of a past event involving law enforcement. That tension makes the story addictive. We want to know the truth, but we're also captivated by uncertainty. The mystery isn't just in the documents. It's in the contradictions, in the gray areas, and in the unanswered questions that continue to swirl around decades-old claims. And here's the mini cliffhanger to close this chapter. Just as the alleged records began circulating and sparking debate, a new element appeared, a piece of corroboration that seemed to validate some of the claims, yet contradicted other key details. Social media lit up, commentators scrambled to analyze every detail, and suddenly the story had another layer. One that would change the conversation entirely. If there is one image that can stop a conversation in its tracks, it is a mugshot. One photograph, one moment frozen in time, can spark curiosity, judgment, and debate, all at once. And that is exactly what happened with the alleged mugshot of Doria Ragland. The image that seemed to appear out of nowhere, only to vanish as quickly as it arrived, leaving more questions than answers. Imagine scrolling through your feed and seeing a photograph captioned with decades-old claims, showing a woman you know as a mother, a professional, a calming presence, now in police custody. The impact is immediate. People react instinctively, forming judgments before context has even been offered. The alleged mugshot created the perfect storm: shock, disbelief, curiosity, and controversy, all packaged in a single viral moment. So what do we actually know about this mugshot? According to supporters of the claims, the image depicts a younger Doria Ragland in standard-issue police attire, holding a placard with identification details, possibly including a name, date, and charges. At first glance, the photo seems to corroborate claims of an incident involving law enforcement. To many viewers, it appeared undeniable, a visual record of a past that had remained hidden for decades. But here's the complication. The image's authenticity is hotly disputed. Critics question whether it is truly Doria Ragland or if it has been misattributed. Some argue that the photograph could have been altered, mislabeled, or even digitally manipulated. Others point out the lack of corroborating public records. Unlike official arrest records, which can be verified through county or state databases, This alleged mugshot has no confirmed source accessible to the public. That uncertainty is precisely what makes it so magnetic. The more ambiguous the image, the more discussion it generates. Let's explore how the mugshot allegedly surfaced. Sources claim that it appeared online initially in small discussion forums, then was cited by a few investigative bloggers, and eventually mentioned in commentary about Tom Bower's book. Some reports suggest it was circulated as part of leaked digital archives, while others indicate it may have been found in a private collection of scanned historical police records. No matter the source, once the image was visible, even briefly, the ripple effect was immediate. People started sharing, debating, and attempting to trace the origins of the photo. One of the most interesting aspects of the mugshot is its sudden disappearance. Within hours of its circulation, many copies were deleted, social media posts vanished, and the original sources became difficult to trace. This disappearance only fueled speculation. Supporters argue that the removal confirms the sensitive nature of the image, perhaps even deliberate suppression. Critics, meanwhile, suggest that the rapid deletion is evidence of a false or misleading image being pulled before verification. Either way, the vanishing act intensified the public's fascination. Let's consider the psychological angle. Humans are naturally drawn to images more than words. A document can be read, analyzed, and debated abstractly, but a photograph creates an immediate emotional response. It evokes judgment, curiosity, and empathy simultaneously. That's why the alleged mugshot had such a visceral effect. People weren't just reading about the claims, they were seeing them. And even after the image disappeared, mental images lingered, leaving viewers constantly recalling it, debating its legitimacy, and asking, what really happened? Now, the context, or lack thereof, of the mugshot adds another layer of complexity. Even if authentic, a single photograph cannot tell a complete story. It captures one moment, but not the surrounding circumstances. Was this part of a minor misunderstanding? Was it related to another person entirely? Was it misinterpreted by whoever shared it? The ambiguity is what drives curiosity and speculation. Every viewer is left to fill in the gaps, often based on assumptions rather than verified facts. Adding to the intrigue is the broader pattern of disappearing or hard-to-verify images in high-profile controversies. History is full of cases where alleged photographs surface briefly and vanish, leaving the public to wonder about authenticity. That pattern naturally leads audiences to question the reliability of information while simultaneously magnifying its allure. And in Meghan Markle's case, the stakes are even higher. Every detail about her family is scrutinized more intensely than most public figures. A single image can dominate headlines and social media threads for days. There's also the question of intent. Why would a mugshot appear and disappear? Supporters claim it is proof of deliberate attempts to suppress information about a past incident. They argue that institutions, media outlets, or even private individuals may have intervened to prevent circulation. Critics, however, caution that digital content naturally disappears online due to user deletion, platform moderation, or archival errors. The truth may never be fully known, but the disappearance only adds drama, uncertainty, and tension, the perfect fuel for a narrative-driven exposé. Social media reaction provides another layer to the story. Once the alleged mugshot was shared, users began dissecting every detail: clothing, background, posture, facial expression, and even lighting. Some tried to compare the image to verified photographs of Doria Ragland from the same era, searching for matching features. Others speculated about motives, legal consequences, or whether the photograph was staged. That combination of analysis, speculation, and debate created viral engagement. And as we know, engagement equals attention, which means the story spreads faster than anyone could have anticipated. It's also important to note the ripple effect on traditional media. When an image like this surfaces, even in limited or unverified form, reporters, columnists, and analysts take notice. Headlines may hedge with words like alleged or reportedly, but the story still enters the public consciousness. From there, social media amplifies it, discussion forums dissect it, and audiences worldwide form impressions, even in the absence of complete information. That's the power of visual evidence, real or purported. And yet, controversy persists. Some point out that without an accompanying arrest record or court documentation, the photograph alone cannot confirm any event. Others argue that even with legal documents, interpretations can vary widely. Some viewers read the image as confirming serious allegations, while others view it as a minor or misrepresented incident. The debate is endless, which is exactly why the mugshot continues to be a focal point of curiosity and speculation. Finally, let's consider the cliffhanger. Just as the alleged mugshot began circulating and disappearing, new claims emerged about secondary sources, people who allegedly saw or interacted with Doria Ragland around the same time. Some of these sources support the narrative hinted at by the mugshot, while others directly contradict it. The tension between conflicting accounts created a perfect storm of mystery, debate, and emotional investment. The public was left wondering, was the photograph proof, a misrepresentation, or something else entirely? What do you do when a story from your family's past suddenly explodes into public view? When decades-old claims, disputed documents, and a resurfaced mugshot threaten not just your image, but the carefully constructed narrative you've spent years building. For Meghan Markle, the answer wasn't simple, and her reaction sent shockwaves that the world noticed immediately. The first sign that something serious was unfolding came not in a press release or official statement, but in silence. A deliberate, calculated silence that, paradoxically, spoke volumes. In the world of public figures, silence is rarely neutral. It is a statement, a tactic, and often a signal to the media and public alike. But what exactly was Meghan signaling? Was it denial, a legal strategy, or something far more complex? Sources suggest that Meghan and her team quickly recognized the stakes. The resurfacing of alleged records and images tied to her mother was more than a minor distraction. It had the potential to dominate headlines, social media discussions, and even long-standing narratives about her life. The silence, therefore, was part strategy, part necessity. A careful pause allowed legal counsel to assess the situation, anticipate potential fallout, and plan a measured response. But in the absence of immediate clarification, speculation ran rampant. The psychology behind this reaction is fascinating. Humans are wired to interpret silence, particularly in high-stakes situations, as a form of acknowledgement. By not responding immediately, Meghan's team inadvertently amplified the story. Social media users debated the implications, journalists wrote cautiously worded headlines, and the audience filled in gaps with assumptions, some fair, some wildly exaggerated. The silence itself became part of the narrative, fueling curiosity and heightening tension. After the initial period of silence, Meghan's response, or what can be described as selective messaging, began to surface. Press statements emphasized context, questioning the credibility of sources and highlighting the disputed nature of the claims. Carefully worded language focused on privacy, accuracy, and misrepresentation. Yet, for many, these statements did little to calm the storm. Instead, they created a sense of friction. Supporters viewed the responses as necessary damage control, while critics interpreted them as evasive, further deepening curiosity about what was being concealed. It's important to note that this reaction wasn't unprecedented for Meghan. Throughout her public life, from her acting career to her royal role, she has faced controversies that demanded careful, strategic communication. In each instance, responses have been calibrated to minimize harm while maintaining control over her public image. But in this case, the story had unique complications. It involved a family member, alleged past legal issues, and documents that could not be independently verified by the general public. The combination created a communication challenge unlike any she had faced before. Let's examine another layer: timing. Meghan's alleged response, or lack thereof, coincided with the publication of Bauer's book and the circulation of the mugshot. That timing suggests coordination, whether intentional or reactive. By not immediately addressing the claims publicly, Meghan's team may have been buying time to assess legal options, consult advisors, and decide on next steps. The effect, however, was a spike in speculation. The public, craving answers, turned to social media, forums, and commentary shows to piece together their own narratives. In addition to legal strategy, there's a human element. No one can ignore the personal impact of seeing your mother's past suddenly thrust into public view. Reports suggest that Meghan experienced intense frustration, disbelief, and even anger at the resurfacing of decades-old claims. For someone who has been scrutinized relentlessly, the added pressure of defending a family member while protecting her own image is immense. That tension is palpable in her statements, interviews, and carefully crafted public appearances, each calibrated to reassure without escalating the controversy further. Interestingly, the reaction wasn't uniform across all communication channels. While official statements remained controlled and cautious, social media activity displayed subtler signs of engagement, or perhaps damage control. Posts were carefully curated, photos selectively removed, and messaging adjusted to maintain a balance between visibility and discretion. Each action, small as it might seem, was part of a broader strategy to manage narrative while addressing an increasingly intrusive public conversation. Yet, despite these measures, the story continued to gain momentum. Analysts and commentators noted that the combination of a high-profile journalist, alleged documents, and selective public response created the perfect storm for virality. Every detail, from word choice to timing, was dissected and debated. And as attention grew, so too did pressure, both on Meghan and her team, and on the media outlets tasked with reporting responsibly. Critics argue that the selective responses may have inadvertently fueled the controversy. By not fully clarifying the situation, or by framing responses in terms of dispute and privacy rather than outright denial, Meghan's team left room for conjecture. Another dimension worth exploring is emotional impact. For Meghan, this wasn't simply about defending her reputation, it was about protecting her mother. Family loyalty intersects with public persona in ways that are deeply personal. Balancing empathy, discretion, and strategy is no small task. Every public statement carries weight, every perceived misstep invites scrutiny, and the personal stakes magnify the pressure exponentially. The tension escalated further as commentators noticed subtle signs in Meghan's behavior and public appearances. Analysts dissected interviews for tone, facial expressions, and phrasing, attempting to read between the lines. Body language experts and media critics alike speculated about stress, frustration, and calculated restraint. The result? Every public interaction became part of the ongoing narrative, adding layers of intrigue, speculation, and emotional engagement. And then came the mini cliffhanger that would carry the story forward. Despite careful messaging, a previously undisclosed interview resurfaced from years prior, one that seemed to hint at awareness of past family struggles. The timing was uncanny. Audiences poured over it, drawing connections between her words, the resurfaced mugshot, and the alleged documents. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't just about the records. It was about perception, legacy, and what these revelations implied for Meghan herself. When a story threatens to unravel decades of carefully curated image, public statements alone are rarely enough. For Meghan Markle, the resurfacing of alleged records and a mugshot linked to her mother wasn't just a media problem. It was potentially a legal minefield. The response had to be strategic, calculated, and decisive. And according to sources close to the situation, behind closed doors, Meghan's legal team was working at a pace that matched the intensity of the public storm. The first step, according to insiders, was assessment. Every piece of information, from court records to the alleged mugshot, had to be scrutinized for authenticity. Legal experts, both in the US and the UK, were reportedly called in to verify the documents, evaluate potential risks, and develop a contingency plan. This stage alone could take days, or even weeks, because the stakes were incredibly high. One misstep in communication could ignite lawsuits, defamation claims, or even further media attention that would amplify the story rather than contain it. What makes this situation uniquely complicated is the nature of the alleged evidence. If authentic, a mugshot and associated records might be public documents, but they are decades old, fragmented, and often incomplete. That ambiguity creates both legal and reputational challenges. Legal teams must weigh whether to challenge claims directly, issue statements disputing authenticity, or pursue removal of images online. Each option carries risks. Challenge too aggressively, and you draw attention. Respond too softly, and you appear evasive. Finding the perfect balance is a strategic art form. Sources suggest Meghan's team initially pursued a combination of these tactics. Cease and desist letters were reportedly sent to outlets circulating the alleged mugshot or documents. Social media platforms were contacted to remove images, citing privacy violations and potential misrepresentation. At the same time, the team was quietly investigating sources, attempting to trace the origin of the leaks and determine whether any legal action could be taken against individuals who had allegedly shared or amplified the claims. But legal maneuvering isn't just about paperwork. It's about perception. For someone like Meghan, whose public image is a primary asset, how the legal response is perceived matters almost as much as the response itself. Aggressive litigation can backfire in the court of public opinion, making a person appear defensive or guilty. Conversely, inaction can make silence seem like tacit acknowledgement. Meghan's team reportedly worked to navigate this tension carefully, crafting statements that emphasize privacy and dispute without appearing overly combative. Interestingly, sources indicate that the legal response also involved preemptive measures. Potential scenarios were considered. What if new images surfaced? What if additional witnesses came forward? What if mainstream media picked up the story in a way that framed it as fact rather than allegation? Each scenario required contingency plans, messaging strategies, and legal review. In essence, Meghan's team was playing a high-stakes game of chess, moving several steps ahead of potential developments. At the same time, there were complications. Legal experts note that pursuing aggressive action against alleged records or images from decades ago carries inherent challenges. Statutes of limitations, jurisdictional issues, and the nature of public records can all limit the effectiveness of lawsuits. In addition, the public's fascination with scandal creates a dynamic where attempts to suppress information can paradoxically amplify it, a phenomenon often called the Streisand effect. Meghan's team had to tread carefully, balancing legal strategy with public perception. Adding to the drama, sources claim there were internal debates about whether to confront Tom Bower directly. While Bower is a respected journalist with extensive documentation, confronting him legally could have brought even more attention to the claims. Strategists reportedly weighed the risks of legal confrontation against the potential benefits of discrediting sources or halting the spread of alleged evidence. In the end, caution seemed to prevail, with a focus on damage control rather than direct legal battles against the journalist himself. Another layer involved the monitoring of online platforms. According to insiders, Meghan's team was tracking discussion forums, social media accounts, and even private messaging groups to identify where images or claims were being shared. Each post had to be evaluated. Was it factual? Did it require a takedown request? Could it influence broader perception? The level of scrutiny was intense, reflecting the high stakes for someone in Meghan's position. Legal and strategic efforts were reportedly paired with media management. Carefully worded statements were issued to trusted journalists and outlets, emphasizing disputes over accuracy and context. Public appearances and interviews were timed to minimize exposure to questions about the alleged claims, while simultaneously reinforcing positive narratives about Meghan's life, work, and family relationships. This dual approach, legal pressure behind the scenes and public narrative management, demonstrates the complexity of handling a story with both personal and public ramifications. The human side of this battle is equally important. For Meghan, protecting her mother's reputation is more than a legal challenge. It's a personal mission. Emotional factors, loyalty, and family bonds undoubtedly influence the decisions behind each legal move. This is not just about documents or images. It's about shielding a loved one from scrutiny, judgment, and potential harm. And in high-profile families, the emotional stakes are magnified exponentially. Finally, the tension escalated because of what sources describe as unexpected developments. New leads, alleged witnesses, and online discussions emerged at a pace that even the most prepared legal and media teams struggled to match. Every day brought new challenges, forcing rapid adjustments to strategy and messaging. The combination of pressure, scrutiny, and uncertainty created a perfect storm that kept both Meghan and her advisors on edge. And here's the cliffhanger to close Chapter 5. As the legal and media strategy unfolded behind closed doors, a surprising revelation emerged. one that threatened to undermine months of careful planning and could potentially redefine the narrative entirely. The implications were immediate, dramatic, and impossible to ignore. When a story involves decades-old alleged records, resurfaced mugshots, and high-profile families, the media and public often don't have to wait long for insiders to weigh in. And in the case of Meghan Markle and her mother, the leaks began almost immediately. Friends, former colleagues, and distant relatives all suddenly seemed to have something to say. Each revelation, whether subtle or sensational, added layers of intrigue, contradiction, and tension to an already explosive story. Insiders have a unique position. They know details that the public cannot access, and they often share these details, whether intentionally or inadvertently, under the radar. In Meghan's case, sources close to the family reportedly disclosed anecdotes about Doria Ragland's life in the 1990s, some of which aligned with Bauer's claims, while others contradicted them. These accounts range from casual memories to more serious allegations of encounters with law enforcement. Every new disclosure fueled speculation and forced both Meghan and her team to respond, subtly or directly. One category of leaks involved former friends and neighbors. People who had lived near Doria in Los Angeles reportedly recalled incidents that, at the time, were small and personal, but now carried broader implications. Some claimed to remember a police visit, while others described behaviors or circumstances that, taken together, appeared to support allegations of legal troubles. However, as with any anecdotal testimony, memory is unreliable, perception is subjective, and motivation can be complex. The ambiguity of these recollections made them both tantalizing and dangerous for public discussion. Then there were former colleagues. According to sources, individuals who had worked with Doria in the 1980s and 1990s were approached or volunteered information about her past. Some painted a picture of a strong, professional woman navigating challenges, while others hinted at struggles with authority and isolated incidents that could be interpreted as problematic. The mixture of positive and negative recollections created tension. How much weight should the public give to anecdotal reports, especially when they seem to contradict one another? Family members also contributed, intentionally or otherwise, to the swirling narrative. Extended relatives, distant cousins, and even former in-laws were reported to have provided fragments of information, stories, rumors, or observations about Doria's younger years. Some of these accounts corroborated aspects of the alleged records, while others seemed to challenge them. The result was a patchwork of claims that further complicated the public's ability to understand the truth. The psychology of insider leaks is fascinating. Sources often leak information for reasons ranging from loyalty, revenge, or personal gain, to a simple desire to be part of the story. In high-profile cases like this, the motivation can be nearly impossible to discern. And for Meghan, these leaks were particularly challenging. They were deeply personal, often unverifiable, and carried the potential to shape public opinion about her and her family. Social media amplified every leak. Once anecdotes or claims were reported in minor outlets, they spread quickly on platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and discussion forums. Users analyzed each claim, compared it to known facts, and speculated on authenticity. The speed of dissemination created a dynamic where even unverified leaks had real consequences. Suddenly, the court of public opinion was in session, judging, speculating, and debating with ferocious intensity. Interestingly, some insiders reportedly attempted to protect the family even as they revealed information. They provided context, emphasizing misunderstandings, minor infractions, or isolated events. Yet, in the frenzy of public attention, these nuances were often lost. Headlines focused on the most shocking elements, while the subtleties, context, intent, and personal growth were minimized or ignored. That imbalance fueled sensationalism, ensuring the story stayed in the spotlight. Other leaks, however, were clearly more sensational in nature. Some sources seemed intent on revealing the most salacious details, whether to gain attention, influence public perception, or increase the impact of Bauer's reporting. These accounts often included speculation about motivations, legal encounters, and personal behavior, all of which could not be independently verified. Yet the mere appearance of these claims kept audiences glued to the story, debating, sharing, and forming opinions based on partial information. The conflicting nature of these insider revelations created a fascinating tension. Some claims supported the emerging narrative of alleged legal trouble, while others contradicted or softened it. The juxtaposition made the story unpredictable. For viewers and readers, this unpredictability fueled curiosity, suspense, and engagement. Each new leak felt like another puzzle piece, but no one could be certain how the pieces fit together or if they fit at all. Meghan's team reportedly monitored these leaks carefully. Legal experts, media strategists, and public relations professionals tracked who was speaking, what was being shared, and how it might affect perception. Some leaks were addressed quietly behind the scenes. Others were countered with subtle messaging in interviews, articles, or official statements. The goal was to manage the narrative without escalating the controversy, an intricate balancing act, given the volatility of social media and public curiosity. A key element in this chapter of the story is the contrast between private and public knowledge. To the public, each leak appeared as a revelation, something previously hidden. To insiders, many of these details were well known or minor, only gaining significance because of the surrounding controversy. That contrast highlights the subjective nature of scandal. What seems shocking to the public may be mundane to those who experienced it firsthand. Finally, the chapter reaches its cliffhanger. As insider revelations continued to emerge, a particularly compelling source stepped forward, someone with direct, verifiable knowledge of Doria's alleged legal troubles. This source promised a first-hand account that could confirm or contradict key elements of the story. The anticipation was electric. Audiences waited with bated breath, aware that this revelation could dramatically shift the narrative. Every explosive story eventually reaches a point where rumor, speculation, and anecdote meet something closer to verification. In the case of Meghan Markle and the resurfaced claims about her mother, that moment came with the emergence of the first confirmed witness. This was someone who claimed first-hand knowledge of the events allegedly surrounding Doria Ragland in the 1990s, a witness whose account could not be easily dismissed, ignored, or spun away. And the impact of their testimony sent shockwaves through the public, the media, and Meghan's inner circle alike. The witness, according to sources, was an individual with direct involvement in or observation of law enforcement interactions during the time in question. Their account reportedly included detailed recollections of an incident involving police intervention, which aligned in some ways with the claims presented in Tom Bower's reporting. They described circumstances, locations, and procedural elements that added specificity to the story. Elements that were missing from previously circulating anecdotes and disputed documents. What makes a witness like this so powerful is the combination of specificity and credibility. Unlike online commenters, distant relatives, or anonymous sources, this person could provide details verifiable through cross-referencing records, dates, and known events. That fact alone elevates their testimony above speculation. It creates a tangible link between the allegations and reality, which for many audiences transforms suspicion into belief, or at least serious consideration. However, even with this testimony, the narrative remained complicated. The witness's account did not paint a uniform picture of wrongdoing. Some descriptions suggested a minor incident, potentially exaggerated over time or misinterpreted by contemporaries. Others offered context that humanized Doria, highlighting stressors, misunderstandings, and the challenges she faced as a single mother navigating a complex life. In other words, the testimony was far from black and white. It was nuanced, messy, and emotionally charged, which only amplified public fascination. Public reaction to the confirmation of a witness was immediate and intense. News outlets picked up the story, cautious but eager, using language like alleged and reportedly to hedge while still reporting on the claims. Social media erupted, with threads dissecting every possible angle. Could the witness be trusted? Were there ulterior motives? How did this account align with the alleged mugshot, the supposed court records, and prior anecdotes? Every detail was scrutinized, discussed, and debated endlessly. Interestingly, sources indicate that the emergence of this witness created internal tension within Meghan's team. Suddenly, private legal assessments and controlled public messaging had to account for a figure whose claims carried verifiable weight. The team reportedly considered multiple strategies, issuing statements to dispute credibility, quietly negotiating with the witness, or emphasizing context to minimize perceived severity. The stakes were high, because a misstep could transform an already complicated situation into a full-blown public relations crisis. Psychologically, the witness's account created a kind of cognitive earthquake for audiences. For years, Doria Ragland had been seen as a steadying influence in Meghan's life, someone above reproach in the eyes of the public. The witness introduced a contrasting perspective, forcing people to reconcile past admiration with potential controversy. That tension made the story addictive. Viewers and readers were drawn to the unfolding narrative, desperate to understand how these conflicting images could coexist. Another layer to consider is the legal dimension. A confirmed witness with first-hand knowledge could have implications far beyond public perception. While decades-old claims might not result in criminal consequences due to statutes of limitations, the presence of verifiable testimony adds credibility to any civil claims, media reporting, or legal maneuvering. For Meghan's team, that meant reassessing risk, recalibrating strategy, and preparing for the possibility that further corroboration could emerge. Supporters of Bauer's reporting seized on the witness testimony as a vindication of the narrative, seeing it as the first tangible proof that something previously hidden had occurred. Critics, however, questioned motivations, timing, and selective memory. Was this witness fully impartial, or could there be personal or professional reasons for coming forward at this moment? In high-profile controversies, the motivations of insiders and witnesses are always scrutinized, and the public is left weighing credibility against speculation. The witness also contributed details that seemed to reinforce specific elements of the alleged mugshot and court records. For instance, they reportedly described procedures, police interactions, and even small identifiers that matched documents seen by some sources. These overlaps created a sense of convergence. Multiple threads of information pointing to a single,